So just to let you know, folks, tonight Martin is going to be the facilitator, not me. So, and I'm absolutely thrilled. So Martin, everybody knows Martin. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. First question is, hopefully everyone can hear me okay? Yep. Good, because sometimes this is an older machine I'm using and it doesn't have necessarily the best speaker. So if you find you're having trouble hearing me, definitely let me know. All right, so welcome everyone. It's, I think, what, the third or fourth time we're doing this format, which is obviously a little bit different than usual, but I think it's, under the circumstances, it's a pretty good way to go. We still get that whole social thing. We get to see everybody's backyards or houses, which is kind of fun. And we get out, of course, everybody's face, which is also good. And luckily, it also allows some of our partners, agents and vendors and winemakers to come out and join us without having to drive all that distance to Burlington. Because usually they come from Niagara or all kinds of other places, right? So yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. And I hope you enjoyed the first, the bubbly there, a bit different from our usual, Moscato sparkling. Did everyone enjoy that? Great, great. All right, yeah, but yeah, it's good to try new stuff, and you know, the pairings are always fun. That's half the fun, seeing what it works with. The lady to my left, or on your screen, I guess. Well, I'm not sure. I guess she's to your left. Okay. That's my wife, for those who don't know. Yeah, the better half. Okay, so tonight we have two different wineries that are presenting wines with us. One is Creekside, which I'm sure some of you have been to out of Niagara, and the other one is Lakeview Cellars. So we'll have reps from both those wineries attending and telling us about the wines as we go along. So now, I'm not sure, Marilyn, are you going to bring up the slide deck, or how do we do that?
I don't have the slide deck. Do you have it?
Right. Well, I have it open online. I just need to share it, I guess, right?
That's correct. You just have to share screen.
Oh, yeah. I see in Grindegarden, they always said doesn't play well with others, and there it is. No, I'm just kidding. There it is. Oh, look at that. Magic. See that?
Perfect.
Now hold on, I gotta put it in slideshow mode. Probably to look a lot better.
Yep.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Of course, hopefully I can do this. Oh, look at that. All right. So, as you all know, Teresa, of course, is our club sommelier. So she's her name's on top of this deck. But you know, being the president, that's the what you call it, the presidential privilege. Yes. Okay, so we're going to go through a little housekeeping right now. So we are recording this session, but if you want on your own Zoom, you can turn off your video if you don't want to be, you know, a famous internet star in the future. Of course, we're not doing anything here that hopefully we can't share, but just to let you know, if you feel like you want extra privacy or whatever, feel free to turn off your video so you don't get recorded. There is a feature in Zoom to ask questions, so you can hit the chat, little chat button at the bottom of the screen, and you type in your question. And then with my co-hosts, Angela and Marilyn, we'll work out how to get your question answered by either myself or someone more knowledgeable, depending on the nature of the question, of course. And of course, with Zoom, there's two modes. There's speaker mode and gallery mode. I guess some of you probably have already played with that. So speaker mode, you only see the person who's speaking. With gallery mode, of course, you get to see little pictures of some of the other people. So it's up to you. Choose whatever works for you. Of course, it's fun to have the gallery mode because then you get to see a lot more faces and, you know, see who's who. All right. So I already talked about the opening wine. So that one was provided by Lakeview, right? So we have, now is Michael on the call? I didn't see him.
Yeah, I'm here. Michael's on the call and Dave.
I'm here too.
Okay, because I saw Dave. Michael German and David Grant. Now, Michael is from Trajectory, which is a source in this area, and David, I believe, is from Lakeview itself. Right. So, welcome, gentlemen, and we'll have them speaking as we bring up the wines that are associated with their winery. Okay, so we'll move on to some other stuff here. So recent events we had in June, Hobbs and Company, and Nancy Kennedy was presenting for that one. Nancy is also on this call because she also represents Creekside. So welcome Nancy as well. Coming up the next few months, being as COVID seems to be, let's just say, not going away real soon, we're going to continue to do this virtual format. It seems to be working fairly well. We're having good attendance in spite of the challenges that the times are offering. And so hopefully we look forward to seeing you again in the next few months. So as I mentioned tonight, we have Nancy Kennedy on the call, Michael German and David Grant. They're all representing wineries. And we also have Chef Maggie, who is well, the one who actually provided the recipe and the video for the artichoke and asparagus fritters, which I got to say, Beth made them today, and smells great in the house. So hopefully you all got a chance to make some, and if you didn't, well, you'll hear the stories, and maybe that'll entice you to make them next time. All right, so next thing. So just a bit about the club itself and wine events and promotions. So I want to remind you that if you go to our BurlingtonWineClub.ca website, there's an events link where you can see upcoming events, and that way you know who's on and what date. Now it's important to remember that if you want to attend an event, you should at least sign up for the Friday before the event, before the actual meeting. That gives you time well, for us to manage getting you a kit, getting your wine for you, and for you to pick it up, and all those things. Now also, because of the current situation, more so, there's lots of our partners who have done some promotions to help us through these tough times, to make sure we don't go thirsty and all. So if you go to the BurlingtonWineClub.ca website, there's a promotions link, and you can see there some of our partners' links and some of their offers. So we encourage you to check that out. Lots of good wine there in case you're running low. So we have a Facebook page now that's been up for, I think, a few months. So I encourage you to check that out if you're a Facebook fan. There's also Instagram, where you'll see pictures from some of our events. You'll see pictures of the yummy food that some of us have made. I can say, little plug, Beth's pictures are up there from when she made some of the food. So check those out, because if you're not hungry, check those pictures out, because you might get there. And also, there's also a link for winecountryontario.ca, which you might want to check out. Lots of interesting information there about Ontario wineries in general. And also, latest edition now, as you see on the bottom there of the screen, there's a YouTube for the Burlington Wine Club, and you can see Chef Maggie's video there if you haven't already received a copy. We'll also show the video during this meeting for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. You'll get to check that out. Okay, so we're going to move on to the first flight, which are the white wines. So hopefully you'll have them handy. And what I'll do is, because, like I said, we're dealing with different wineries, so we're going to pass it back and forth between the different representatives. So the first wine is the Pinot Grigio from Lakeview Cellars. So I'm going to ask either Michael or David to speak about that wine. And in the meantime, if you want to grab your broccoli salad, you can already have it, and you can take a taste of that while they tell us about the wine. Gentlemen?
Perfect. So I'll step in. Again, I'll kind of introduce myself a little bit further. So I'm Dave Grant. I'm the Director of Sales on premise for Trajectory Beverage Partners. We are the agent that represents Lakeview. I'm also a sommelier. I've got education from a couple different sides. I did the WSET 1, 2, and 3, and then I got my CAPS sommelier certification as well. CAPS, if you aren't familiar, is the Canadian Association of Professional Sommeliers. And I also teach at George Brown. I teach wine at George Brown as a continuing education class. So that's a little bit of background just on me to give you some overview of who I am. So I'll kind of jump back a little bit and just talk about the Fresh Horizons sparkling really quickly. So the sparkling Moscato is kind of unique and interesting. There is not a ton of Moscato, to be completely honest, in our marketplace. Many of you who are familiar with Moscato probably would think of Jacob's Creek. It's been around a long time. This is a bit of a different direction. Obviously, it is sparkling in comparison to Jacob's Creek's flat version, but the nice thing about this particular sparkling wine is that it's not over the top down that sweet path. It's much more in balance. It's not over alcoholic, so it's about 9% alcohol. So it's actually very easy, very sort of destined to sit on a patio, and I would use the term crushable. It's not exactly a sommelier term, but It's something you can move through pretty quickly. It's got nice bubbles. They're very almost like frizzante style, but it's very aromatic, very floral, very easy drinking. And that's kind of all I'll say about the sparkling. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. It's a perfect aperitif. So I'm going to move over to our Seasons Pinot Grigio. I'll talk just briefly a little bit about Pinot Grigio. It's actually the #1 selling white wine in the world. Part of that reasoning behind that and why it is so successful, to be completely upfront with you, it's very safe. Pinot Grigio is very neutral. It's never going to go down a path that's too aggressive or too light. It's sort of right down that neutral zone. Very easy drinking. Again, similar to the sparkling, it's very destined for a patio of a hot summer day. Very refreshing, very crisp, very easy drinking. There's different styles. This particular style is down that lane of crisp and refreshing, but it's got a little bit more fruit. A lot of times Pinot Grigio can be a little bit almost too neutral. You might hear sommeliers call it the water of wine because it really isn't going to go too far down any lane. This one's got a little bit more depth, so you'll get a little bit more fruit. I mean, you're going to get classic things like apple and pear, but you're also going to get a little bit of honeysuckle. There's a little bit more floral coming out of this particular Pinot Grigio. This particular brand called Seasons, you won't find in the LCBO. It's completely designed to be an on-premise or restaurant, hotel-driven wine. So you'll find it in restaurants throughout Ontario, but you won't necessarily, or you'll find it at the winery as well, but you won't necessarily find it at the LCBO, and that's designed on purpose to be a non-reference brand, so that it's something that's unique to restaurants that they can have in their back pocket as a house wine or a by-the-glass wine that you'll have to go back to that restaurant to get it. In this case, we're opening it up to you guys as a bit of a one-time offer. Mike's been good enough to track this program down and open this up to you. So today we've got the Seasons Pinot Grigio and the Seasons Cabernet Merlot, but both of them, as I said before, are just available in on-premise. They're not necessarily going to be something you'll find at the retail level. So this Pinot Grigio, I'll kind of go through a little bit with regards to food and wine pairing as I talk. So there's a couple of guidelines. There's really no rules when it comes to food and wine pairing because different people like different things and different people have different palates. However, there are a couple of guidelines. So one of those typically is the most universal. It's to match like with like. So typically if you've got wine characteristics that exhibit certain things, like if you've got apple and pear coming out of the wine, you're going to match with apple and pear specifically. If you've got high acid wine, you're going to match with high acid dishes. Okay, like with like. That's kind of one direction. So this broccoli salad's kind of interesting. It's an interesting pairing. What I will say is that there are going to be some things in the salad that are going to match up. These raisin directions are actually surprisingly might have matched up really well with the Moscato, but they're going to still match up with the Pinot Grigio. Sometimes you've got sort of herbaceous qualities, and that broccoli will have a little bit of herbaceousness. It actually, when we get to wine 2, which I don't represent, you may want to go backwards to the broccoli just to see how it compares to the Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc often will have that herbaceous direction. The other guideline that I'll talk about with food and wine pairing is salt and acid. These are wine's best friends. So what you'll find is if a dish is very salty, it's going to make the wine's acidity a little bit muted. It's going to heighten the fruit. It's going to make it seem a lot more palatable. Same thing with acid. If you have a high acid dish, it's going to make the wine a lot more neutralized. It's going to give it a lot more fruit, a lot more expressiveness. Just something to remember as we move forward. But I will say this, if you have tried the Pinot Grigio, try it on its own first. Make sure you try it once, make sure you coat your mouth properly. Go back in and try it a second time. The first time you try a wine, it's always going to be more of almost a mouthwash, to be completely honest, just coating your mouth. You might have had gum, you might have had a cigarette, you might have all kinds of different directions. So your first sip is really just that coating. Your second sip is going to tell you whether you feel about the wine, whether you like it, what the expression is. So in this particular expression, it's like I said, it's very straightforward, kind of everything you're looking for in a Pinot Grigio with a little bit more depth, there's a little bit more color. Often Pinot Grigio will be very almost water-like. This has got a little bit of color, a little bit more aromatics, and really does deliver. So if you haven't done it, go ahead and try it on its own and then try it again with the broccoli salad and then come back to it.
Martin, can I just ask you to turn off your screen sharing, please, Martin?
Sure.
So that we can see Dave.
Sure, there you go.
Thank you. And Dave, just while we have you with your mouth full,
Sure.
we do have a question. Where do we get the sparkling?
So everything that's going to be talked about from my end is coming from Lakeview Cellars. So I didn't really introduce Lakeview Cellars properly, but Lakeview Cellars is formerly Diamond Wine and Spirits. Diamond Wine and Spirits is the overarching company, but Lakeview Cellars is the winery itself. So it is Niagara on the Lake. We represent a host of different brands. So you'll find 20 Bees, East Dell, Lakeview Cellars itself as a brand, Seasons, Serenity by Lakeview Cellars, Fresh is another brand by Lakeview Cellars. There's a host of different VQA brands by Lakeview. It's actually one of the top VQA producers in Canada. Out west, we've got Backyard Vineyards. So there's a host of different brands from a VQA perspective represented by Lakeview. So those are all Lakeview Cellars. They're all available. Mike, I'm sure, has set everything up in terms of how to order. Is that correct, Teresa? They all know what they're doing?
Yep. We'll take orders afterwards. Angela will collect them.
Perfect. So the other thing that I'll talk about with Seasons before I move on and let Creekside take over for the second wine is these are wines that typically, if they were in a retail setting, would be in the $15 range. We really designed a brand where we wanted it to over-deliver on a couple of fronts. We wanted the label to punch above its weight, but we wanted the wine itself to punch above its weight as well. So this is being offered to you at a price that you'll never be able to get, to be honest, anywhere else, at $10.80 retail. Again, this is a licensee-only product typically that we've opened up to you guys at an unbelievable price. But if this were at the retail level, it would be about $14.95. Okay, hopefully everyone's enjoyed that. I will stop talking and pass it over to the Creekside rep. I believe Nancy is her name.
Yeah, that's my name, Dave. You were great. Thanks. That was really informative. Yeah, so Creekside Estate Winery has been founded in 1997 and decidedly right from the beginning decided that they were going to sing their own song and do their own thing and not follow the mainstream. And so the result of that has been the flagship wines are Sauvignon Blanc and Syrah. So that's not what everybody was doing. And our winemaker, Rob Power, took those under his wing and developed them. And the 21 years he's been with Creekside out of 23 years we're in existence, he knows his grapes like the back of his hand, and that's a wonderful thing. So Sauvignon Blanc is our flagship white, and both the Sauvignon Blanc and Syrah are very high award-winning wines and sort of benchmark for Ontario, and we pioneered those varietals. So this, to talk a little bit more about the varietal itself, Sauvignon Blanc is very aromatic. Rob loves to make aromatic whites. Gorgeous. It's clean, crisp, refreshing, fabulous spring and summertime wine all through the year, but specifically it's super refreshing, especially this hot summer. It's the notes are very herbaceous, very green. So when Chef Maggie chose artichokes and asparagus fritters, you're singing Sauvignon Blanc song. Anything sort of pungent and aromatic and green and herbaceous is what pairs very, very well with Sauvignon Blanc. Goat cheese, oysters is another really good one. But when I looked up in the tasting notes, just for something more recent, it named both artichokes and asparagus, and we've got them both in the fritter, so it's perfect for this wine. So I hope you really enjoy it. It's got a little bit of, it's got a lovely little tropical finish, sort of like a star fruit. I had a lady once tell me she was from the islands that it smelled like the star fruit orchards on her island. So I hope you love it, and cheers, and have a sip, and then have a taste with your fritter and see how well it pairs. I hope you love it like we do. It is available in the LCBO for $15.95. I don't know if there's anything else, anyone has any questions about Sauvignon Blanc, but
Just one second. No questions directly about that, but I've been to Creekside several times. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous location. Could you tell us a little bit about what services are available at the winery today in stage 3 if we wanted to visit? Because you did include the pass.
Right. Yes, we did. So we, like a lot of the wineries, it's by appointment. we would take up to 6 in a group. And you do need to book that appointment because we're trying to make sure that the hospitality area isn't too crowded. We also have our outside deck where we have a chef, Ross Midgley. And right now, what we're doing, because we're actually just trying to find our way really through this, is that it was provided a restaurant on weekends, but right now we're doing like a market style. So Ross is making wonderful sandwiches, salads, charcuterie boards. He's doing all kinds of fresh canning and sauces and jams and pickles. And so you come in and you kind of shop. You shop for your lunch, and you're welcome to grab a picnic table or find a table on the deck, have a glass of wine, a bottle of wine. So we're just trying to follow the guidelines as best as we can and make it safe for everyone to come and visit.
Great. And Dave, when we get back to you, I'll ask you the same question on some of the wineries you represent, okay? Teresa or Martin, are we at that point where we can share Chef Maggie's video? Martin, at your direction, are you okay with that?
I think it's appropriate to do it now because obviously we're having that particular bit of.
All right, folks. So I'm
absolutely,
I'm going to share my screen, and at the beginning, what might sound like feedback, ha ha ha, here we are in Canada, are actually the cicadas in Chef Maggie's backyard. So hold on for that. All right, here we go.
Good morning. You're here with Chef Maggie from Indulgent Chef in my outdoor kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make artichoke and asparagus fritters. Okay, so in your kit that you receive in your Burlington Wine Club bag, you will also receive artichokes, freshly grated Parmesan cheese, fresh mint, gracefully donated from Teresa's garden, and of course asparagus. Now, aside from those ingredients, you will also need to have flour and eggs, and of course oil to fry the fritters in. Okay, so now we have our mise en place all ready to go, which means you have all your ingredients chopped up and ready to put together. Before we start that, we're going to preheat our pan of oil. You can use either vegetable, canola. I like to mix a little bit of vegetable and olive oil at the same time. We're going to preheat it to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I do have a handy dandy little infrared reader that I like to check the temperature of the oil. You can, if you don't have one of those, is use a wooden spoon, dip the wooden spoon into the oil. If it starts to fizzle, it's ready to go. If not, use the old wives' tale, throw in a crust of bread. If it starts to fry up, it's all good. Okay, so now your oil is preheating. Let's mix all our wonderful ingredients together. Our artichokes, our Parmesan cheese, our freshly fine chopped mint. I love the smell of mint. We're gonna add our asparagus, finely chopped up asparagus. And we're gonna add our flour. Last but not least, we're gonna add in our eggs. Now, what I would suggest is you crack the eggs individually into a bowl and then toss them into your ingredients. Nothing worse than getting a crunchy eggshell in your actual recipe. So we're gonna individually drop it in there. We're gonna make sure there's no shells, and we're gonna continue on. Now, the great thing about these eggshells too is I like to toss them in my garden. I have a lot of little bunnies that like to come around and eat my wonderful flowers. So I like to crush them up, toss them underneath my soil, and they don't like that crunchiness feeling underneath their paws. All right, so we've got all our ingredients tossed into our big, beautiful bowl. We're gonna integrate everything, make sure everything's wonderfully mixed. And you should end up with a wonderful mixture of like a very wet product. All right, we tossed in the egg and the flour, which is technically the binder. What's going to keep your fritters together so they don't fall apart when you actually start to fry them. Actually smells quite nice right now. Okay, so our oil at this point already should be hot enough. We're going to start dropping tablespoons of fritter batter into our hot oil. Now, I can make them bigger, or you make them smaller depending on how many you want to have. Okay, so now we're ready to start frying up our fritters. Our oils are up to the proper temperature. I'm just using a regular tablespoon to portion it out and scoop it into the actual pan. Now, depending on the size that you want, you can adjust the sizing of the scoop. So I'm just going to drop in. You can hear the sizzle already. That means the oil is at the perfect temperature. Since these are fairly small, they're not going to take very long at all. You want to make sure that before you turn them over, there's going to be a beautiful browning on the bottom. Already, I can smell the actual asparagus and the Parmesan cheese. And also, don't overload or overcrowd your pan. It'll make it a lot easier to have to flip them over. So we're just going to let these cook probably for about 20 seconds. Just enough so that they're brown enough that you're able to easily flip them over. They smell divine. And these will go great with the Sauvignon Blanc that is part of your wine kit for this month. These would also go great with a great sparkling. They're fried, they're salty, perfect combination. So have it as an appetizer when you're inviting your guests out for nibbles. And I think we're almost ready to flip them over. You got a beautiful browning, as you can see. Almost half the fritter itself is already cooked, which just means we're ready to flip it over. There we go, beautiful. You want a nice golden brown on the bottom. Hence why don't overcrowd. They'll slide a little bit around the pan. Whew. That's okay, that'll be mine. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful coloring. And we're just gonna give that probably another 10-15 seconds. And then we're just gonna let them drain. I've got a pan here. Not toss them on some paper towels and let the paper towels take up all the oil. Now you want to best eat these warm. Not hot, but warm. This thing up the bottom. Perfect. We are done. We're just going to let them drain. Once they cool off just a little bit, you'll be able to enjoy them with that beautiful glass of wine. And here we have our final product, our asparagus and artichoke fritters, which I've also made now in olive relish to go as an accoutrement. If you would like the recipe for that, just follow the link to my website and I'll have it posted on my website. We're enjoying it with our wonderful glass of Sauvignon Blanc. Enjoy, and in the words of Julia Child, bon appetit.
Thanks for that, Maggie. It was awesome.
That was great.
You look good.
Shall we move on to the next wine and food pairing, Martin?
I just wanted to say, for those of you who haven't seen the video before tonight, do check it out, because right after that little scene we just saw, there are some end credits that are kind of fun. So you want to check that out. And also, I wanted to add, because I have a bit of an indulgent shelf at home, Beth actually got the recipe for the little olive relish, and she made that to go with the fritters. I tell you, it adds a whole new level. So you might want to try that sometime too.
Wow.
And I guess we can go back to Dave now for the next one.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, I'll definitely have to make those. Those look really delicious. So I'm going to move over to a different direction. So we're going to move from Sauvignon Blanc over to Chardonnay. I'll talk briefly about Chardonnay, and then I'll talk specifically more about the Lakeview barrel-aged Chardonnay. But Chardonnay is an interesting grape. It's kind of polarizing. Typically, people either love Chardonnay or they hate it. It's kind of, there's no in the middle for it. Some of the reasoning behind that really stems from the fact that Chardonnay comes in many different directions. It's the world's most planted grape. And it can come either unoaked and more focusing on the fruit, or it can be oaked, or it can be really oaked, depending on where the winemaker wants to take it. But it's a grape that can be really sculpted and crafted by the winemaker. Even once the grapes are harvested, they can push it in different directions. So I would say this about Chardonnay: it's polarizing because the people who typically hate it typically don't like the oak, and they don't like the over oak. This is labeled as a barrel-aged Chardonnay, Lakeview barrel-aged Chardonnay, but it is not super far down that path. You know, you've probably heard terms like Chateau 2x4, which are just heavily oaked. So typically, oak is used in inexpensive wines to cover up flaws, and if in very expensive ways to heighten the flavor profile of the palate and of the aromatics of the wine. So it can be used in a positive way, it can be used in a negative way. In this particular wine, it's not over oak. We've got about 12 months of a mix of French and American oak, which is not a heavy dose. Typically, you may get up to 24 months for some of the higher end wines that have the ability to hold that structure. Chardonnay is the only grape really that has the depth and the power to handle oak. And part of that is because it is the thickest skin grape from a white perspective. The majority of white grapes are going to be unoaked. But this is a bit of a middle ground. So this is barrel aged, but it's not overly down that path. So it's got a nice balance. This is, if you're going to find this at the LCBO or at the winery, it's a $22.95 is the price point that this lands at. It's actually really quite balanced. I often will put this in front of people who say that they hate Chardonnay because I feel like it's a good middle ground. It's not unoaked and has, you know, it's not zoning completely on the fruit, but it's not way too far down the path of oak and it's masking everything. This is a nice balance. You're going to get, you know, the beautiful vanilla aromatics coming out of the oak, but you're also going to get this deep sort of baked apple, baked pear that's also coming out of the fruit. So it's a good hybrid between the two. In terms of what we have for the pairing today, it's kind of an interesting pairing, to be completely honest, with these glazed carrots. It actually works quite well. I wasn't sure kind of going into it where this was going to land, but I'm actually quite impressed with it. It's not something I've ever really sort of heightened to try to pair, but with vegetarianism and veganism really heightening and becoming a real thing these days, it's something that I may start experimenting a little bit more with. If you haven't had it, go ahead and try them together. The other thing I'll highlight about Chardonnay is that often it's going to come in if you're coming from California, Chardonnay can be a little bit over alcoholic. Often you'll find elevated alcohol between 14, 15 and a half, often even 16 coming from California, which is a little bit over the top, a little bit heated. You'll feel it in the back of your throat. That alcohol, it's called hot, basically, is what Psalms would say. This is really in balance, and I think it's something that Ontario can do on a world-class level. So I'll talk a little bit more quickly just about Ontario and where we thrive. So we really do thrive on a white perspective, with a few reds that I'll talk about a bit later. But from a white zone, you know, Sauvignon Blanc, Nancy talked about Sauvignon Blanc being a passion for Rob, the winemaker there. Sauvignon Blanc is an emerging segment out of Ontario, specifically one that I think we're going to develop more and more over the next decade. You're going to see a lot more quality Sauvignon Blancs. We make a beautiful one from Serenity that we're not trying today, but it's one of those grapes that's definitely coming on the scene. Chardonnay is one that's been on the scene a long time and will continue to be on the scene. I think we can do it just, you know, people think of Chardonnay and they think of Burgundy, but the realistic reality for Ontario is that we can compete with Burgundy. People kind of laugh at me sometimes when I say that, but we've actually won competitions against Burgundy in California as a blind pirate, where nobody knew that Ontario was even in the competition, and Ontario beat them both. So it's something to look for. If you are Chardonnay fans, you know, definitely look at Ontario properly. It's one of those grapes that thrive. You know, the whites, Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, sparkling is another emerging thing. You're going to see more and more in the next decade on sparkling for Ontario. But from a white perspective, those are kind of some of the driving. The other one I didn't mention that we're not trying today is Riesling. And Riesling is definitely an Ontario specialty. But I'll stop talking about Ontario and we'll move on to the next wine because I've probably talked about this one too much. If there are questions as I'm going through this, don't hesitate. I can see the chat pop up. So it doesn't have to be wait till the end and then kind of go through it. We can do them as they go. So just don't hesitate. There are no bad questions. I will say that as well. In my class, that's kind of the first rule is if you're thinking it, somebody else is probably thinking it too. So don't be afraid to ask anything. Okay. So we're going to move past the barrel-aged Chard. Again, that's $22.95. I believe I have to double check if it comes in, if we're shipping it direct, if it's 6s or 12s, but I'll double check which one that is. Going back to the Pinot Grigio, it comes in 12s. Going back to the sparkling, it comes in 12s as well, but the sparkling is a $375, the rest are $750. Okay.
So Dave, there was a question about the Chardonnay. The sample size that the members received for tonight, is that available or is that just for these kind of special occasions?
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, this is a unique format. We do have this as well as the Dan Aykroyd that might have been in your kit, the Dan Aykroyd Cabernet Merlot. These are the only two at the moment that we have in a 200 ml format, but we do have them available. They are actually $4.95 retail each, but we could do sort of a mixed case potentially as well. We can do mixed cases with seasons as well. As we get to the next season's product for Cab Merlot, you could do a 6 and 6 with the Pinot Grigio if you wanted to do that as well. Okay. We're going to move over, and I'll keep talking. We're going to move over and back to Seasons by Lakeview. So we've got a Cab Merlot. The blend is about 55-45 Merlot to Cab. You'll find often in Ontario, I talked about things that thrive. Cabernet is much harder to grow for Ontario. Our growing season is a little bit different compared to some of the world-class Cabernet in the world. So you'll often find that if you're getting a straight Cab from Ontario, it's probably going to be elevated in price point, usually around the $35 mark and up, just because the quality is going to be different because the yields are not the same. It's much harder for us to get to that quality level and that yield. So it's going to be more expensive. So you'll often find really red blends coming out of Ontario. And so this Cabernet Merlot actually is really, really nice. I would sort of the term that I would associate with this would be smooth. It's very easy drinking. Again, got a bit of an elevated stature. We really wanted a wine that punched in that $15 to $17 range that we could bring to licensees. Again, this is only on premise. You won't find this in the LCBO, just like the Pinot Grigio. This entire brand Seasons is completely non-referenced to retail, but we wanted something that over-delivered, and we got it. This actually has interesting notes from a SOM perspective. I don't know if anyone's talked about acetone on any of these calls ever, but acetone, believe it or not, on an aromatic scale is actually a very positive thing. It's something I love in wines, typically associated with higher quality wines. There's a little bit of that coming off the nose on this, but really ripe cherries, ripe blackberries, that's kind of what you're getting out of this. A little bit of spice, but really, really does deliver. We've got this paired with the chicken wings, which is kind of interesting. My feedback is make sure you got a little bit of salt just to sprinkle on the top of those wings, and it'll really heighten the wine and really bring out that fruit. Okay, so this is the same price as the Pinot Grigio. $10.80 is the price point. Again, it comes in packs of 12, or we can do 6 and 6 with the Pinot Grigio as well. So I just rattled off a whole bunch of information. If I'm talking too fast, please tell me. I will try to slow down. Are there any questions as well?
Not so far, but Martin, if you're there, could you just share the red pairing placemat so that people can see that and be reminded as well?
Yeah, if you haven't flipped over your placemat, you're going to want to do that. This actually just says Seasons Red, but it actually is a Cabernet Merlot. So a lot of people, I'll say one more thing about blends. I often run into people that are like, oh, I'd rather have the straight varietal, almost like Scotch. They want the single malt. They don't like the blend style. And I kind of always smile when I hear this, but I often ask them why, and they just say, oh, you know, I'd rather have the straight varietal. And then I say, well, what do you like to drink? And then they say Bordeaux, and I giggle because Bordeaux is predominantly going to be, a Bordeaux blend is made up of Cabernet and Merlot. That is the driving force of a Bordeaux blend. There's often 3 other grapes. I'm not going to get into it, but Cab Merlot is nothing to shy away from, especially from Ontario. You really do want to move towards blends. Straight Merlot is something that's coming back on the scene as well. You'll see it evolve over the next 10 years. It's actually happening now in the LCBO. Merlot is actually one of the top growing categories from Ontario, believe it or not. But it took a hit from Sideways, if you've seen the movie Sideways back in 2004. So the main character really hyped up Pinot Noir and just threw Merlot under a bus. But after that, we're kind of recovering at this stage in the game. Merlot is really coming back on the scene because it is a really smooth, really easy drinking, but very aromatic and very expressive grape. And I think this Cab Merlot blend, believe it or not, I mean, I taste this with Soms blind. They don't know what I'm tasting, and they think this is a $20 bottle. So we've really done our job from a winemaking perspective on this wine. Let me know what you guys think. But at this point, I'll stop talking, and I'll hand it over to Nancy.
Maybe before we do that, Teresa, this was your suggested pairing. Could you help the members understand what drew you to putting these two together? I've put her on the spot now.
Vote.
She's muted.
Sorry. I'm back. So they're barbecued wings. I like Cab Merlot and barbecued foods. So of course we could have had a steak, but really tricky to put in the kit with our price point. But I used Chef Mike's spices and then tossed it in barbecue sauce afterwards with the idea of giving it more fullness. And here it's going to be interesting because Psalms, of course, disagree on things all the time. I would say add some pepper to your wing to bring out, to further enhance it with the wine. But I think my thinking was the wings would hold up to this particular wine. Mm-hmm. But you guys ultimately are the judge.
Yeah, I think it does. I'm with you. I mean, pepper is a different way to go. There's definitely some spice in the wine. I would actually say for the next wine, as Nancy gets to the Syrah or Shiraz, I'm expecting it's probably got a little bit of pepper in the undertone, probably white pepper. It's going to probably highlight that as well, but you might try a wing with the Shiraz coming up next too.
All right, Martin, could you now unshare? I think everybody knows the next two courses are cheese and then followed by chocolate. So then I will move over to Nancy. So you have the calm, Nance.
Thanks, man. So like I said earlier, we decided early on in the birth of Creekside in the late 90s, we were going to march to a different tune. Having said that, Syrah is certainly that. We do make lovely Cabernets, Merlots, Pinot Noirs, but our Syrah is probably the most award-winning red in Ontario. Having said that, a few years ago, we won the best Canadian red wine for our Broken Press Syrah, which Rob was very touched because early on when he was the pioneer in planting this grape in Canada, growing it, producing it, he was told by a lot of his colleagues and farmers that it was never going to take, it was never going to be anything. And for this varietal to win the best red in Canada was a huge win for us. I hope you love it. I just want to politely say that when we first made it, we did call it Shiraz because back in those days, it was a New World wine and we are New World. Therefore, we called it Shiraz. But about 7 years ago, we decided we were going to change it and call it what it is. And it is truly a Syrah, which means it's a Northern Rhone France style, which means it's done with French oak. And it's a lot more subtle, elegant, less oak. Therefore, it's a really nice dark berry with a bit of a, well, this particular one that you're trying tonight is more of a white pepper dusting as opposed to, say, that real New World like Australia, California, where it's American oak and it's a big cracked black pepper. This is much more subtle and elegant. It's a medium style. So it will take you from hot dogs to steaks. We over deliver in this wine. Wine writers and awards have all said It should be a $25 wine, and probably Dave will agree. He knows it very well, I'm sure. So I hope you love it. I think the cheddar cheese and the saltiness and the sharpness of the cheddar will just bring out all those beautiful qualities of this wine. And this is also $15.95.
So Teresa, remind everyone we'll be sending out an order form. Would that be tomorrow? Tomorrow's Friday of a long weekend. Hard to believe here we are.
Yeah.
Unmuted, yes. Before the end of the weekend, for sure. Actually, it'll probably be tomorrow. Angela does it. And to remind everyone, you can order full cases, but you can also order part cases under Teresa's cases. So if you have individual bottles, or you want 3 or 4 of this or 4 of that or 2 of this, then I will order the full cases. So anyway, we'll make sure that anybody's orders are what they want, and that'll go out from Angela tomorrow.
Perfect.
Or Saturday.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in and pay? I want to pay a
Not buying a
compliment.
motorcycle tonight. Pardon?
No.
Sorry, Nancy, I'm sorry.
Sorry, hi. I just want to pay Dave a compliment, because I'm one of those people that went from New World Chardonnays, really big oak, to unoaked. And so I swung with the pendulum, and then I started to revisit Chardonnays, where now I'm sort of back in the middle, where I think some people are finding themselves, where Dave's made this beautiful Chardonnay that's like a kiss of oak, and it's lovely and pleasant and quaffable, and it's a great balance, and I would definitely drink this wine. It's lovely.
Thanks, Nancy. You made it pretty much clear. It's bang on. I mean, Chardonnay comes in waves. It goes to a wave of unoaked, and everyone jumps on the unoaked bandwagon. Then 4 years later, it goes to oaked, and everyone jumps on the oak bandwagon. Then 4 years later, it goes to unoaked. There's just this constant up and down. It's kind of a weird group. Yeah.
It's great. I really like it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I didn't make it, for the record.
Oh, well,
I'm the director of sales for On-Premise.
give
I
you
didn't make the
credit.
wines. I can talk about them just because I saw them, but I didn't make them. Yeah. Our winemakers are fantastic, though, and so is Rob from Creekside.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess I'm moving on, Martin, or do you want to chime in?
I wanted to ask you a quick question, Dave, about your Chardonnay, because as probably most of our attendees here will know, Chardonnay, depending how it's made, can be cellar for a number of years. So for yours in particular, is there some idea about cellaring potential?
That's a good question. I haven't really talked about that side at all, but yeah, Chardonnay is one of the white grapes that does have evolutionary ability. One of the things, I don't know if you've talked a lot about ageability on this, I don't know what to call it, channel yet, but every wine basically is alive and has a lifespan, and that lifespan starts sort of at the bottom where it's probably not quite ready when it's released, and it's going to go up this curve, and it's going to go continue up, evolve and evolve and evolve until it hits a plateau, and then it's going to hit that plateau where probably it's in an ideal state, and then it'll fall off a cliff and die. So the neat part about wines is that they're all different, and Chardonnay is one that can go a lot longer than most white grapes because it does have a thicker skin. It can be aged in oak, so it's got more of a backbone. Typically, most red wines are the ones people think of that have that ageability and that ability to go decades in some cases. This particular Chardonnay, again, personal preference is always going to have something to do with it. Some people like to drink when it's more fruit forward and it's more upfront and early. Others will wait until it's more evolved and you get more of those earthy flavors and those mushroomy notes, which is going to come later in time. So personal preference is part of this puzzle. But I will say that this wine probably can go between 5 and 10 years is kind of where I would put it. It's not massive in the sense that it's going to go decades, but between 5 and 10 years is probably not a problem at all. Good question. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the other two wines that were part of our flight, so the Cab Merlot is really meant to be drunk fairly young. It's not heavily, oaked, and it's not that direction for the season's Cab Merlot. It's really meant to be drunk within the first 5 years. It can go a lot longer than that. I would say it can go 10 years, but it's more of a fruit forward, smooth direction, and that's kind of where you want to be drinking it. So Like for example, right now we're on the 2017 vintage. It's 3 years old, right? So it could go another 2 easily. It could go another 5 easily, but I actually think it's drinking quite nicely right now. And my recommendation would be on that evolutionary curve. This is kind of where I would plug it in, but I personally like fruit. I can understand and respect when it goes to that earthy, kind of more mature, leafy, foresty direction, but you lose the fruit. So for me, this is kind of right where I'd like it to be. And different wines are going to find that spectrum. But the Pinot Grigio is kind of a drink right away. Okay. I'm going to go on to the last wine, which is a brand that we've just created in the last year. This brand is called Serenity by Lakeview Cellars. You will find it in the LCBO. There is a sister of it. So this is the Baco Noir. It's the red. There is also a Sauvignon Blanc. And this year, actually in our second season, we're releasing a Pinot Noir Rosé as well. So you'll find all 3 of them in the LCBO. They're all line priced at $15.95. The concept of this particular wine, it's Baco Noir. And I don't know how familiar most of you are with Baco Noir. It's kind of an interesting cult varietal for Ontario. You really won't find it in, I want to say almost, you won't find it anywhere else in the world for the most part. It is an Ontario-driven grape, and it's one that has a big cult following. There are some others out there. Sandbanks really is a big one. Henry Pelham makes a big one. Those are probably the most successful versions of Baco Noir to date. We've released this one to kind of get in the game a little bit. It's actually quite nice and quite drinkable. It does appeal to a certain crowd, I would say. Some people love it. Some people don't like it at all. It's kind of like Chardonnay, but not really. It's very specific. This one's very smoky. You're going to have smoked blackberries, smoked cherries, a little bit of cocoa, a little bit of chocolate. So this pairing actually with chocolate, I was like, this is perfect. I'm happy to see this. The chocolate probably should complement this quite well, as there is a little bit of chocolate in this wine. I talked about earlier matching like with like. This is a good, perfect kind of natural cohesive pairing. But yeah, this is available at the LCBO, or you can order it direct from us as well. Either way, it's going to be $15.95. It does come in a case of 12. I'm trying to think if I've left anything out. This is a mixture of oak, so it's French and Hungarian oak this time. Only about 8 months. So it's, again, really more focused on the fruit. The evolutionary curve for this wine isn't as long. I would say Baco Noir, typically you want to drink it really before it hits that 5-year-old mark. I would say really 3 is as far as I probably want to go with Baco, just because it's really more about that fruit forward, easy drinking sort of profile, right? The tannin on the wine is there. It's not, and when I say tannin, it's there, but it's not overpowering. And I think that's why this has done pretty well for us in its first year and will continue to grow. Okay. Again, all the wines from our flight are 750s, except for the fact that you can get the Lakeview Chardonnay in a 200. Or you can get the fresh sparkling in a 375. Okay. And that's pretty much it. I'll stop on that note.
We do have a question. This has been not only a year to remember, but potentially a summer to remember. Hot, dry. We've had those in the past in Niagara. Any predictions with your crystal ball, Dave, about what we should expect coming out of this year?
So help me understand the question a little bit more. You mean in terms of seasonality, in terms of climate?
Yeah, it's been hotter, drier than maybe some other summers. So is this a year to put on our calendars in 1 to 2 years' time?
Yeah, I got you. Okay, so is it a good vintage?
Yeah, that's the one.
It's a great question, and it's one that is very applicable for Ontario specifically. One thing that I'm sure all of you know at this stage is our weather patterns aren't as consistent as somewhere like Argentina or California or a lot of other places throughout the world. We're very up and down, and it's been a very, very hot summer. So this is going to be a summer that's going to compare to sort of ideal red vintages. If you go back in time over the last 15 years or so, so 2005 was a good vintage for reds. 2007 was an ideal vintage for reds, one of our top ever. 2010 really stood out. 2012 stands out. This is going to be in that lane, very hot, for the most part dry. We've had a little bit of rain here and there, but it's been pretty dry. So it's going to really lend its hand towards driving those reds. The whites are always going to be pretty good. We're not going to struggle to make good whites in any season. I would say typically white wines are going to be the one thing that we can do in Ontario on a consistent basis. It's the reds that are going to go up and down. And I think this is really going to stand out. If you go back to 13 and 14 on the other end, 13 and 14 summers were, cold. We had the polar vortex, if you remember what that felt like. Winters were, minus 30. So those were struggling seasons where our rootstocks got murdered in the winter and we didn't recover all that well. So we struggled to make good red wines in those 2 seasons. Whereas this year, it's completely the other end where it's really going to sway that red direction. So yeah, you're going to want to look for these ones. Yeah.
Hey, there's the answer.
Can I jump in with something that Robert just said recently? Because I remember the summer of 2016, which was an awesome growing season for everyone in Ontario, depending on where you were, because some of the grapes got fried. But anyway, he had said, don't worry so much. Yes, we need rain, and we actually hired water trucks to come in and, hydrate the vines. But he had said surprisingly resilient grapes go into hibernation to protect themselves. And he said, what really, really matters is September.
Totally.
So you need the long growing season. So if we have a good September up to harvest, September, October, that's what really, really matters. We'll get through this. We'll do whatever we can to keep them hydrated, but it's at the end of the growing season that will tell you what a vintage is going to be. And he just said that recently, so I thought I'd throw that in.
Nancy's 100% correct. There are years like 2006 where we had an ideal growing season until the last 6 weeks in the fall where it rained every single day and it flooded the grapes, and the season we lost a lot of yield. You could still make good wine, but it was a lot less than it should have been. We had ideal season until it just was the opposite, right? So she's bang on. The end of the summer, and beginning of fall and harvest is crucial. So in my eyes, this has been a great summer so far, but we'll see what happens in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So folks, we're right on 8:30, which is a pretty good place to try to transition to the next portion of the meeting at your discretion, Martin. But I did want to give Dave equal time to tell us about how we can enjoy Lakeview, because we also received a pass in the wine kits.
Thank you for reminding me, Marilyn. Yeah, so if you haven't been to Lakeview Cellars, it's on the main drag in Niagara on the Lake. It can't really be missed. There's a couple different sides. There's the winery retail shop on the right, and on the left is probably the biggest warehouse in Niagara. The facility is surprisingly large, but you really want to focus towards the retail shop. The voucher will get you in there for a complimentary tasting. You'll find all of these brands that I've talked about already, basically everything from Serenity. You'll even find some Seasons. You'll find Dan Aykroyd, which I haven't talked about. You'll find McMichael Gallery, which I haven't talked about. There's a host of different directions. So it's definitely worth dropping in and exploring. If you do have any questions outside of what we've talked about today, I'll provide my information to Teresa and Marilyn and Martin. And, if you have questions about wine in general, you can send me an email. I'll be happy to answer anything.
Thanks, Dave. That's awesome. Martin, I think you might have some slides to take us into the next portion of the meeting. You might need to share your screen for that.
For sure. One last question for Dave, though, because I know there's a couple of Dan Aykroyd wines that were put in the kits. Can you quickly tell us, Dave, if you have any particular pairing tips on the white and the red from Dan Aykroyd?
Yeah, it's similar to what I would said for any wine, basically, and that's you want to match like with like. Another way is to match weights. So if you've got a big, heavy red, it's going to go with heavier dishes. If you've got a light red, it's going to go with lighter dishes. So in this case, it's more on the light style. What you've got is a Cab Merlot, I believe. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, it is the Cabernet Merlot, 2017. Very similar, actually, in profile to the Seasons wine. Going to be fairly straightforward in terms of tannic structure. It's not over the top tannic. It's going to be more smooth and more built for everyday drinking. So it's going to go with lighter dishes. It's going to go with stuff like lamb, ribs, to be honest, like barbecued meats. Those kind of directions are going to really work. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, no problem.
I know that we're not paid, but it's good to know for the future, and for anybody who might want to go purchase those wines later, of course. Okay, so we're going to go back to our slides. I'm not sure. Am I still sharing?
You're not. You need to share, please, Martin.
You need to share again.
Yeah. All right. Coming right up. There we move that to happen.
Here.
No, it's funny when computers are
Perfect.
the right way. It's really amazing. All right, so to wrap things up a little bit, so first of all, we want to thank Michael and Dave and Nancy and Chef Maggie, the video star, for all their hard work for tonight. You know what? It's been a wonderful tasting. I got to tell you, from Beth and I's point of view, we really enjoyed all the pairings. You know, and part of the fun is you have the specific pairing that's on the sheet here, but it's, as you know, Teresa will often suggest, try the wines with the other pairings. And tonight, I got to say, almost everything worked with everything. It was really fantastic. So that's, it's always fun to play around with these things. And of course, you know, your own palate dictates what works for you. But this is part of the fun, is to try little quantities of everything and see what direction it might take you. Because sometimes you find things that you had no idea would actually be a tasty thing for you to do, right? And then, you know, that can open all kinds of possibilities. Thank all the volunteers, my co-host Marilyn, of course, who is the techie, you know, directing all this stuff, and for everyone putting together the food and wine kits. That's Dorothy and Lorraine and Kathy and Carl and Ann. Those job. The food is tasty. The wings are awesome. I got to tell you, it's great. Absolutely great. Now, for those who want to buy some of the wines, there will be order forms sent out. I'm not sure exactly when, but shortly. Stay tuned. And I would encourage you, you know what? I can tell you from having worked at a winery before, some of the stuff that Lakeview is offering us now, like these deals on wines that they don't normally sell to the public, that are just for the restaurants. That's a chance to get in on something there, folks. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that, because you're not going to get that opportunity very often. And these are very nice wines. At those price points, they're a steal. I can tell you from my personal assessment, they're a steal. So let Angela know what you'd like, and we'll set up deliveries at Maryland's as usual. And we look forward to everyone jumping in on that. And of course, remember on the website to check the promotions page for any specials from our other vendor partners from the past. Now, moving on to next month, there's going to be a surprise with International Wines. Heck, it's such a surprise, I don't even know about it. But, you know, it's obviously, so that's good. And it's fun to have surprises, right? Especially in crazy times. And again, we'll be picking up the wine and food pairings from Maryland's as usual. So stay tuned for that. And before I stop, I'll turn off the share, but I'm going to turn it over to our friend Rob. Hopefully Rob's still here to do some closing comments. Rob, are you there?
Hold on, let me find Rob.
We have to
You
unmute
did
it.
a fine job, Martin. That's all. That's good.
Thank you.
So folks, what we'd like to do, if you're comfortable, you can stop your video, or start your video, I should say, and we like to do a Brady Bunch Muppet screenshot, just to say that we were all together. If you have a glass and you're comfortable to do that, grab that, and I'm going to count you down. Everybody look to camera with your glass and smile in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Here we go. We're taking your screenshot. Thanks for that. That's awesome. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody who set this up today. Martin and Dave, and I'm sorry I've lost the name. I've had too much to drink. I can't remember the name of the other person.
Nancy was here too.
It's been wonderful. This is my first video share of the wine tastings, and it's been lots of fun. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Glad you joined us.
Thank you.
Tell all your friends.
Oh, one of them? No.
Tonight.
Yep. Same time next month.
Yep.
Betcha.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
When it's a
Bye.
virtual meeting, we don't have a room limit. So stay safe, stay well.
Yep.
Stay safe, stay well.
Yep.
Hello, Gail,
Looking
by the way.
forward to the order forms. I'm going to be
You didn't
buying some
forget.
wine again.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
We'll send out the
Bye.
order forms. You'll have an opportunity to order some wines, and we'll take delivery and pick up at Maryland's.
And please visit us in Niagara. Come to Lakeview and come to Creekside.
For sure.
Looking forward to it.
We will.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.